Welcome to the Lovers Lounge, where we talk to experts and guests on topics related to love, relationships, and sex. I am your host, Tina Love, and today we'll be talking to Mr. and Mrs. Alphonso and Kelsia Ivy. They are both counselors and marriage therapists. And get this, after almost 20 years of marriage, the two are still happily married and have a vision to help others, hence starting Vine Life Counseling LLC. Hello, Kelsia and Alfonso.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, so good to have you. So,
Thank you for having.
yes, thank you all so much. So, why don't you tell me a little bit of background on you two and how you met and how you managed to remain married for 20 years?
Well, we met actually when we were 16 years old, and um, we dated for a while, and then decided later to just be friends. I went to the army. He went to the navy, and once we both finished our terms, we connected
Mhm.
again, and from that point on, we've been together ever since.
Wow. Awesome. Awesome story. That is so good. So, 20 years, you've had some ups and
Yeah,
downs. You've learned a lot.
correct.
So, before
Yeah.
we get into the dynamic marriage program and talking about that, I just want to hear from you all some of the things that you have learned that has helped you to create the dynamic marriage classes.
Well, so I would say maybe about 8, 9 years ago, we would have people that, notice how we interacted with one another and the things that we would do. And we began to have people asking us if we could mentor them.
Hmm.
And, we were like, well, we're young too. So I don't know, but we gave it a try. And then from there, we began counseling people in our living room. And then it went from counseling people in the living room to actually pursuing credentials in it. And right now, my husband, he is a licensed professional counselor. He has LPC from Missouri.
Mhm.
What is it? University of Missouri,
University
St.
of
Louis.
Missouri.
And we went through a credentialing program through Dynamic Marriage, which is a family institute. And so you go through a 3 day extensive course just so you know how to respond to couples and their needs and be sensitive to their needs. And that was what, maybe 5 years ago. So we've been doing dynamic marriage classes for about 5 years in addition to our counseling. And this year we decided to start our own practice.
Great.
Like,
Great.
Well,
S-
last year, really, 2019. I'm sorry.
Okay. So, kind of walk me through then. So, you get couples that come to you, maybe for one reason or another. Maybe you can tell me some examples of some issues that perhaps bring couples into you. And then talk to me about the counseling sessions. Like, how long are they? What is it like?
all right. I would say the I'll say maybe that I'll I'll answer the second portion of that. The average counseling session is about 45 minutes. A lot of times with couples, we'll go ahead and take it out to the hour period of time. But I would say most insurance companies they generally pay for that 45-minute session.
Mhm.
But again, we'll go 60 minutes because most couples need that. I would say some of the biggest issues once a couple comes to us because they've heard about us, or they've been referred, or maybe they were referred by their insurance companies. We'll sit them down and just kind of go through the intake process, ask them how did they meet, what do they love about each other, or what have they loved about each other. Uh, Maybe take them through some things to get them to remember if they are there trying to salvage things or improve things. Remember why they fell in love. Then we begin to maybe process what the major issues are, and I would say there's usually what I would think of as a big five, and so we'll give them what those are, which is usually communication issues or challenges, sexual issues or challenges. It, I would say financial differences, spiritual differences, and child rearing differences.
Right.
And so we just see if they agree in those areas or disagree. And oftentimes they do agree. They may choose communication, for example, and that kind of lets us know where not to waste time and where to begin to kind of dig in a little bit deeper at this communication, for example.
Okay. And so then you kind of see them for approximately, what do you think? How many weeks does it really take to kind of turn things around, you would say?
Well, it depends on their situation. So if we get a couple that's in crisis mode, they may take a little longer, maybe 6 months or so. Sometimes people realize ahead of time, like, okay, we're headed in a direction we don't want to go. Let's just nip this in the bud now before it gets worse, you know. So basically, what we tell them is the first 3 weeks is us getting to know them and to know why they're with us, and from that point, we decide then how long they would actually need to see us, and of course, they would have to agree to it. And then we'll also let them know, though, you may move faster or you may move slower than what we anticipate, but as we go along, we'll figure that out. Um, we also ask them to take the dynamic marriage class in congruence to their counseling if we have a class available. And that class also brings out content that they may have not even thought about.
Okay.
So it's a 9 week class, and in that we touch on what we call love busters, and those are things that a couple will do that really irritate their spouse or their mate, and it's like, okay, this really irked me. So now, what are we gonna do? What safe zone are we gonna create for when you're doing this? I can let you know that this is bothering me, and then we kind of regroup and go back and look at, what can we do, what strategies and tools that we've learned through the class that we can use.
Okay.
So even though the class may be 8 to 9 weeks, um, we tell them do not put your books because they get material. Do not put your books or your whatever strategies you come up with. Don't put it on the shelf where it creates dust. This is something for you to use ongoing because for one, you've invested your time and your finances in it. But not only that, you want your marriage to continue to grow. So with that, continue to go back, periodically and say, okay, let's do another assessment on ourselves and see how we're doing in these areas.
Okay.
Um, and the class focused on affection, sexual fulfillment, conversation, recreational companionship, honesty and openness, attractiveness of spouse, financial support, domestic support, family commitment, and admiration. So each person in the couple, um, they figure out what is their top five emotional needs,
Right.
and then it's up to the other, mate to try to do as much as they can to accommodate their spouse.
Okay. So before we dig a little deeper into the classes and into those, I kind of think of it sort of similar to the love languages, is what I'm kind of picking up.
It
But
is.
yeah, so before we dig into those a little deeper, because I want to kind of walk through each one of those, what I'm hearing you say then is that you can start out with counseling, marriage counseling, because of an issue or some sort. You can also integrate the classes sort of with the counseling session. There is definitely work to be done. There's work to be done in the classes. You probably have work that you'll have the couples do when they're coming in to see you for counseling, but it's
Correct.
all in what they do. And it's not something I heard you, Kelsia, say, don't put this on the shelf, don't let it draw dust. This is something that you have to integrate and do daily, is what I'm hearing.
Correct.
All right. And then I also noticed that you have premarital counseling. So you have counseling for couples that they're not married yet, but they're about to approach getting married. How important would you say is premarital counseling?
I would say it's pretty important. We just want to be able to determine which direction each person is going, and is it a similar direction? Is it a direction of similar faith, finances, or just what have you? But the important thing is developing that standard or direction where they can be, I'll say, for lack of a better word, equally yoked or just going in the same direction.
Yes. How can two walk together unless they agree,
Yeah,
right? They need to be on the same page. Awesome.
absolutely.
Awesome. Okay, so after hearing then about the premarital counseling and marriage counseling, the classes, Kelsia, you mentioned the different, I would call them again, love languages, but you've kind of changed it a little bit. And can you just describe those? I believe you said five, or how many is it?
Well, it's more than five, but what we have them do in the class is pick out their top five.
Okay,
Um, and so we call them the emotional needs,
right.
and it's affection, sexual fulfillment, conversation, recreational companionship, open and honesty, attractiveness of spouse, financial support, domestic support, family commitment, and admiration. So they do coursework, and there's a series of questions um, and reading where you find out like exactly what each one of them mean. And then you have to go through a thought process of what's most important to me.
Right.
And once you find that, each person they at the end, so they have homework assignment every day. So on that sixth day, they're discussing, well, this is what I found that's important to me, and this is what I feel like I'm getting a deficit in. So we talk about the love bank,
Okay.
and it's just like regularly going to the bank. I need deposits in my love bank, and when you do this, you are taking withdrawals out,
I
and so
see.
we help work through that process. Um, to be able to give more deposits than withdrawals. So when you do withdraw, you're not really making the relationship unbalanced because you have so many deposits in. So although we use this in our class, but in the counseling session, we also, if they're more familiar with the five love languages, we use the five love languages as well and ask them to, read the book and to do a pre-test and a post-test, just to see from the beginning of counseling to the end of counseling how you're meeting each other's needs.
Okay. So I'm hearing
Because
then. Oh,
often, uh, I'm sorry, often we feel like um, because this is what I want for myself, I'm going to give it to him or her so I can get it back. But it's not really taught that what I need may not be what he needs. And so I have to find out what he needs instead of depositing what I feel like I would want for myself. That's
absolutely.
where many relationships go wrong.
I was feeling you. I'm sitting here shaking my head because I'm thinking, so say for instance, if one likes kind words, for instance, or affirmations. So instead, because I like kind words and affirmations, I'm doing this to my mate. I'm giving them kind words and affirmations. Well, if that's not their love language, or if that's not what appeals to them, then it's not really, what are you saying? It's not really helping them then. And that's why
Correct.
I guess it's important then to identify what their language is so that you
Right.
can then feed into that and not necessarily yours. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yep.
So, yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. So I really want to, because there's probably a lot of, there could be some people who are married listening and there could be some people who are not married listening. I really want to break down for them these languages so that they can kind of see maybe, you know, where they fit in. Not necessarily will we be able to tell everybody where they are, but they can kind of listen and say, oh, yeah, that's me. Oh, yeah, no, that's not really important. So, can you just kind of at least give us five of them and kind of say, what each one is then, what
All
it
right.
means?
I'll name all five. And yeah, I'll just do that first. Words of affirmation, quality time, receiving gifts, acts of service, and physical touch. And I'm going to let you, Kelsia, talk about uh, receiving gifts since that's yours. So, words of affirmation, just maybe a quick snippet of the words of affirmation. That is mine personally. It is something that is empathic, generally an empathic person or a person who is moved or they feel things deeply with words, and oftentimes they engage other people with words. It moves them quite a bit just to be able to encourage them in that area. You, for example, if you are a radio host, for me to simply be able to say you are awesome at your job, let no one tell you otherwise. You do it with precision and you do it with fire. That should move you and make you feel loved and comforted um, if words of affirmation is your language.
Hmm.
And did you want to stay there for a little bit or just kind of
I think that's good. I
briefly?
think that's good. That's a good example. Okay. There's another one.
And so quality time, that's the next one. And I would say if you have the book, but a lot of times they have it online as well. At this point, to take the test and see where you fall, you can have a primary one, and then you can have a secondary. It just goes down the line based on which numbers are the most dominant ones. And so, my second one actually would be quality. Well, actually, it's active service, but quality time would be my third one down. Quality time is simply it expresses love to me or another individual if quality time is their dominant love language. If you are able to spend some time, and it's not just sitting there with them, but what they determine to be quality. So if that includes some intimate conversation, if that includes being able to hold hands and listen to me with undivided attention without picking up your cell phone or going through your computer or flipping through a show,
Mm.
then that would be what they consider quality time. And when you give that to them, it's a type of sacrifice as if you gave them the gift that they wanted, and that's going to express love to them.
Yes, Alfonso, you may have heard me go, because in this day and age, I guess, with, I don't know, social media, phones, everybody is so attached to their phone. And it was interesting for you to say a part of the quality time is actually, putting the phone down. So I thought that was a very interesting component to quality time. That's interesting. Okay. So another one.
Receiving of gifts.
Receiving of gifts, that's one that um, that's one of my primaries. And so even though I find myself in all of them, but you give me a gift, I am just like ecstatic. Like, thank you, you thought of me. To me, that tells me you thought of me. You know how sometimes people give you a gift card. I'm not impressed by gift cards because to me, you didn't put a lot of thought into the gift. So I want to know that you really thought about my personality, the things that I like. And so when I get that well thought out gift, and it's not the, sometimes people say it's the thought that counts, that won't move me. If you have gift receiving a gift that's one of yours, you really want to know that the person that is giving you a gift, they really thought about you and your needs, your desires, your wants. Um, and so that would be a person that's saying, yeah, I like words of affirmation, but I need you to put some action behind it and give me a gift. So acts of service, that's my husband's biggest one. Um, and he'll talk about that one.
But before I talk about the act of service, I want to add to the receiving of gifts.
Hmm.
There was one, I don't know, it may have been maybe year 5 of marriage, but I remember giving her a box with I had a flower that I picked. I put a penny in there that represented something. I had a little emblem, I want to say, that went around a necklace
Hmm.
and a couple other things, and maybe even a poem that went with it. But that was amazing, and it meant the world to her because she knew that it was a one of a kind. It was an original gift that was specifically meant for her, and that's one of the commonalities that tie the gifts together. I don't know if the book says it. It's been a while since I've actually read all the way through again, but the commonalities are: is it a real sacrifice? Is this something that is for me? So when you look at words of affirmation, was this something you got off a card, or were they for me? Were they tailored for me? This quality time, is it tailored for me? This gift, is it for me? Did you sacrifice something?
Mm.
And then, so acts of service, again, is one of my, it's been back and forth, the dominant. And so what it is, I'll say, I love watches. You can get me a watch once a week and I'm going to love you for it. However, it does something special if you tell me I'm coming to help you mow your yard while you're sick, or I'm going to meet you where you are and try to help you finish this job that I know you've had problems finishing. I'm going to help you organize your office because you have not been able to get that done. Those acts of service to me say that you really care about me. And again, that's the whole concept with the love languages, expressing someone else's language, letting them know that you care.
Okay.
So
And I think there's one more. Is there one more?
that is physical touch. And I think if we went by some of the language that the author of the book used with physical touch, is not just a not the cheapest of the love languages. It's not just something that it is about sexual touch or having sex or anything of that nature. It is more about a closeness. I want to be close to my mate. I want to be connected to them in a physical way. I want I like it when you touch me, or put your hand on the small of my back or on my shoulder in a loving way. And it's not only after sex. It is not only before or during sex, but it's something that says, I really want to be near you and with you. And so that's physical touch. If we neglect these gifts, it can become a void. If we put the two of the things together that we talked about emotional needs and we talked about the love languages, but how they kind of coincide is, or correlate is the fact that one uses the language love tank, the other one uses the word love bank, but it's the same concept, which is it can be depleted.
Hmm.
A void can be created if we're not communicating on the same wavelength. It begins to be just two people talking and nothing being received. And then an emptiness follows, and then there's no love.
It's depleted. Okay. And that was moving right along the lines that I was going to go to next in how important it is to communicate that. So you've got a couple that maybe they've determined what their love language is. Now they have to, or expectations are, now they have to let their partner know and communicate that to their partner. So, how do you encourage your couples or couples who are pursuing marriage to talk about their love language to the other person so that they know what they need?
I'll I'll start and then you jump in, Kelsia, in case you got take a different angle altogether. But I would say one thing that I key in on is, as unnatural as it's going to feel in the beginning, you have to simply make a sacrifice, which is love in itself. Make a sacrifice and practice, 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 because everyone has to practice. Private practice, a doctor's practice. We practice faith, but it feels unnatural in the beginning. It feels robotic, but you just have to make uh, your mind to do these things and practice it on a regular basis, whether it be in session with us or just a few times a week or a certain time daily. So practice and application becomes the biggest thing to me once you know or begin to understand that this other person needs this from you.
Okay. Kelsia, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, and I just want to add to which is it's not really adding. It's just make sure you're intentional.
Hmm.
Yes, you're practicing, but you know how sometimes we can be robotic. We know we have to do it, and we're practicing it to get it in us. But be intentional. Really having your heart that I want to be better for you. Love is an action word.
Hmm.
Everybody they always look at love as this feeling, this butterfly feeling, but love is an action word. And so just know in your mind that I want to be intentional to please you the best way that I can. And if I'm doing that, I know that I'll be pleased.
All right. Okay. So that leads me to the importance of intimacy. I know that you have intimacy in your program, and Alfonso, you kind of talked about it when you were describing physical touch. How important do you think it is to keep the intimacy alive in your marriage? Can you break that down?
I believe keeping intimacy alive is it's a huge thing, and it's another one of those I would say things that falls into the crevices and gets lost over the years, drowned out by work and all the things that we do, the circumstances in life. And if you want to work your way back to intimacy, every now and then it comes with some conflict. And that's actually a part of what we teach in the class too. There's something that we use the initials ICW, which is intimacy, conflict, withdrawal. And so, for example, if you have gone all the way down to withdrawal, in order to make it back to intimacy, you may have to go through conflict. And so there's going to be some uncomfortable times as you're practicing these habits, practicing the love language. The days that it feels robotic, it doesn't feel like it's intentional, but we still have to continue to grind, continue to press through, and try to get back to a place where the other person actually feels that you mean what you say or you mean what you're doing.
And
Yes.
and also with um and I would say that, you know, statistically many of these things are gender specific. But just so people know that it's not 100% gender specific. But in speaking on it, often men may feel like intimacy means, you know, I'm gonna put it down. I'm gonna
Right.
make love to you like no other.
Right.
But intimacy starts when we wake up in the morning. Tell me you love me before you leave. Give me a kiss.
Hmm.
Send me a text saying, "Baby, I'm thinking about you." And you do that when you're flirting, trying to win somebody over,
Okay.
but you have to continue that throughout the relationship. That doesn't stop. You have to continue to try to win me over. Yes, you have me. You may have an engagement ring on me, or you may have a wedding ring on me, but you still have to work for it. So, and I don't even want to say work for it, but continue to woo me, continue to love on me. Making love starts when we wake up in the morning, not just the act in the bed or wherever you want to have it. Um, it starts with us connecting throughout the day.
Kelsia,
Can I add?
oh, okay. I'm sorry, Alfonso.
I was going to just piggyback off that and say, when she mentioned gender specific, I just think
Hmm.
about a man's perspective. Oftentimes, we have to quit listening to certain movies
Right.
and just do what it is that's pleasing to our spouse. And for example, if she gave me a list of things to do, if I asked her, give me honesty, what can I do to be more intimate with you? That you'll feel that intimacy is returning. And she gives me a list of things. And she says, here, you do these five things. oftentimes the movies, Hollywood has led us to believe that I'm not going to do that. She's not going to just be telling me how to make love or telling me how to be intimate with her. But again, if I would just listen to those things that she needs to do those five things, wake up in the morning, give her a kiss, give her a hug, text her in the middle of the day, to just do those five simple things that she wants me to do and practice those. As I said before, in the beginning, it may feel robotic. It may feel like I'm being told what to do, but no, I'm sacrificing for what my mate wants. And eventually that robotic feeling will turn into this is second nature. I do this in my sleep,
All
and
right.
love returns.
That's good. That's good. And, it sounds like then that there's a difference, then, of course, between genuine intimacy and then sexual intimacy. So now, can we move into the sexual intimacy and how important that is in a marriage?
Well, I often surprise couples when Fonzo and I are speaking with them. Um, traditionally, because women have been led to feel that we have the gem that they need to survive, um, we will use that as if you don't give me what I need, you're not getting what you need. And I often tell people, tell ladies, no matter what is going on in your relationship, you have to continue that sexual intimacy with your spouse because, for one, if you don't, somebody else will. But not only that, um, that's part of what makes their makeup. Men generally and statistically need sex. They need sexual encounters. So when you're withholding, then they are disconnecting from you. And it's not always men versus women. Sometimes it's the woman that needs that sexual intimacy to be able to get through her days. And so when you withhold from each other, then you are adding what we call, as Fonzo said, withdrawals and from your love bank, because that's what brings you together. Sexual intimacy brings you together. It connects you. It connects your spirit. It connects your soul.
Right, right. And I would say I'm probably the analytical part of this couple. So, so, so there with me, I'm generally, I'm always going through a process that I call biopsychosocial, and I'm trying to determine what type of cause, what type of barriers do you have? Because a person may be listening right now saying, it's not like I hadn't heard this before, but I still can't do it. And so I'm asking a line of questions every now and then just to find out, is there something that started biologically? And this is no different than Masters and Johnson right here in St. Louis all those years ago. They went through um, situations with uh, erection problems, or just a number of sexual problems,
Right.
but you always stop with bio. Is there something biological going on? Does this person have diabetes? Is there something you need to go to the doctor for? Is there something that's happening? And then I go to psycho, which is there something psychologically occurring because something biologically has occurred? Are you ashamed of your body part? Are you ashamed of something that has occurred or is occurring? And then we just kind of go down the line. And if there are no barriers left, now we can go back into, well, here are just some things that you know to do. Your mate is asking for these things. Is there something or some reason why you can't give it to them?
Okay.
The rest becomes application.
Yes. And so, Alfonso, you talked about you go through the bio and then you go through the psycho. So let's say, for instance, there is a bio reason. I'm just going to give an example of maybe there is high blood pressure and erectile dysfunction is the issue.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find it easy for couples to or even for that gentleman in that hypothetical marriage situation or relationship to admit that this is going on? so that they can then determine how we're going to move on from there? Might there be some
No,
reluctancy to admitting, yes, I'm kind of having some erectile dysfunction issues? I'm just thinking about that as you're asking couples to identify the bio reason. Could there be that this person is not even conscious within themselves of the issue? And then how do you rectify that?
absolutely. It's a difficult thing. I we always recommend not just marriage counseling, but oftentimes can you on the side get some individual counseling as well, so you can begin to work on some of the problems that you're not ready to bring into the marriage session just yet, or it's so deep rooted that you don't know how. And it is difficult, especially for men in that area when we begin to talk about sexual things or financial things, because it's intertwined with their who they believe they are. It's intertwined with their image of themselves, and it becomes, we have this catchword over the last few years, toxic masculinity. I don't necessarily even like the word because it's overused and too broad. But this may be an area where it would actually fit. In other words, the things that we have been taught as masculine, those are the same things sometimes that hold us down or hold us back and do destruction. I've actually seen people. I'm thinking of a guy right now who lost his marriage because of that very reason that he said. It was simply diabetes, high blood pressure, no erection, no intimacy. Then it was over.
Right.
And so it is difficult for some of the men to even come to that point where they feel that they can admit that and begin to talk about it, because they equate that situation or that problem, that challenge, with who they are.
Right. Right. There.
And and
I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, Tina, and also on the other side of that, when you go back to history uh, of a female, sometimes they're embarrassed to tell their mate about things that happened to them, whether it was growing up, or whether it was molestation, whether it was rape,
Yeah.
or they had a certain profession, whatever the case may be. Sometimes they're embarrassed to mention what happened to them, but
Yes.
that's the trauma that prevents them from wanting to be intimate with their mate.
Right.
And so those, and that's when we say sometimes they're in crisis mode, because they're bumping heads and not really knowing, okay, she genuinely loves me, but oh, this is what happened.
Mhm.
Okay, or he genuinely loves me, but oh, okay, I can see how that makes him feel less than a man. So it's bringing that out and communicating that it is hard sometimes
I can
for them
imagine.
to just do that. It's
Right.
not a natural.
Yeah. Not something naturally that can come out.
Right.
Okay. All right. And so, we're along the lines of intimacy and sexual intimacy. Alfonso, I noticed that you are actually in the ministry. So you are a reverend in the ministry. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm one of the pastors at Protocol Christian Center.
Okay. And so I guess that kind of brings me to just an example. What I'm seeing in some is that sometimes when you're saved, right, and you're just Holy Ghost filled, and you're going to church and you're trying to live the word, okay? Do you find sometimes I'm going to say women, just for example, might sort of they kind of lose their sensualness and being the wife because they're very busy trying to be, I don't know, the holy one, or I don't know. Do you understand kind of what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah. Actually, I believe I do.
And what do you
There's
say
a
to yeah? What do you say to couples, that are, you're saved, but that doesn't mean you're dead, or you know what I mean? Can you just kind of elaborate on
Right.
that?
You're saying it That's right.
Yeah, I just want to have you, Alfonso, speak from that because you are a reverend, and sexual intimacy is a part of marriage, and I believe the word says that the marriage bed is undefiled. So, can you just kind of help some people out with that?
Yeah. Um, I would say sometimes we create. I always say that roles create rules. For example, a referee does something, a superhero does something, a preacher does something, and so if we oftentimes we have definitions of the roles we have in our head. So if I say I'm a wife, we whatever family we were raised in, we determine a wife does this. But if I say I'm a Christian, there's a definition with that too, and you have a determination as to this is how I should behave or how I should act. And oftentimes, it's really not based on much more than presumption. Um, the best thing is to go by the word. But if I had to just put it in a nutshell without getting all scriptural, I would say that you don't have to be in bondage, especially when you're two married people. You pretty much got the right to do whatever you need to do, or what you feel is going to be a turn on to you. One of the things that set me free, Kelsia and I went through 27 marriage classes
Hmm.
with our pastor many years ago, and I it was itching me, and so I had to ask the pastor because I had the religious mindset myself, and I said, "Hey, do you guys, do you make love to gospel music and do you dance to gospel music?" He was like, "No, not at all." And so he went on to explain. He said, "Okay, well, we don't listen to me and Mrs. Jones or music that's indicating that we're cheating and such. But yeah, there's nothing wrong with some jazz. There's nothing wrong with some music that is sensual." And so that was the beginning of me saying, "Okay, I can't just go around making up religious orders or religious duties that's not necessarily based on the word." And so, again, in a nutshell, just because you are a Christian, it doesn't mean that you cannot go out and have fun, or I'll say stay in and have fun in the bedroom with your spouse. You got anything to add to that?
Okay, thank you.
And one of the things I think people tiptoe around is oral sex,
Hmm.
and you do have some Christians that frown upon that. But once again, if you look in the Bible, there's nothing saying what type of sex you can and can't have with your mate. It
Okay.
doesn't say you cannot have oral sex with your husband, you cannot have oral sex with your wife. And that question comes about. And I guess the biggest thing that Fonzo mentioned is we really just try to lead you back to the word. And so when you put yourself in a box, it's because you're putting yourself in a box over what people said and not necessarily what the word said.
All right. Good. Well, I just wanted to cover that because, I know that there'll be all kinds of listeners, that will listen to the Lovers Lounge. And I don't want them to feel uncomfortable as though the show is asking or saying that they should do something that they're not comfortable doing. But I just wanted to make sure that we cover the fact that because you are married and because you are saved does not mean that you can't explore and do different things, with your spouse in your bedroom. And I just wanted to make sure we cleared that up.
Right,
Okay.
right.
So just before we go, I want to just say to you too, if you can just say to our listeners what you identify as probably the most important element in a marriage. You guys have been together 20 years. What is the most important element that you can identify and say to the listeners today as far as what they need to make sure they have in their marriage or relationship?
Wow, that's a big one.
It's hard.
I'm almost afraid that I might miss it because we've had so many over the years. So maybe I'll just go with me myself. I have developed an ability, and some of it comes through prayer for sure. But I've developed an ability to know when to defer, and someone may call that picking your battles. There's just some things that I'm going to defer to her instead of saying, "Hey, I'm the man. My way or the highway." And it's not that way. It's just we are a team. We just have to know where our strong suits are and defer to the other person when it's going into their strength. Just recognizing that, and it keeps us as a strong team over the years, respecting one another, highly regarding and esteeming one
And I,
Awesome.
I would say, um, and I know that this is not a biblical show or Christian show, but um, one of the things that we have always said that the thing that keep us together is God being our third strand. Because when you do that, it's not about if he's right, if I'm right. It's about what did God say about it. And we're always trying to go back to, okay, what did God say about it? And I know that doesn't help the person that maybe not be a spiritual thing, but for us, that has been very important. And the second thing is forgiveness. You have to be willing to forgive and have grace and mercy for your
Mm.
spouse. Because if not, then that's when grudges happen. That's when stony hearts happen. Um, and so you have to be willing to have grace and mercy for your spouse and forgiveness.
other.
All right.
And can I add one other thing to that, just to specifically speak to the people who they may not be of a spiritual background or a Christian background, but just to kind of have it all inclusive. Um, for those couples who it's not necessarily a thing of faith for you, I would still say the common denominator and what I'm saying and what my wife is saying here is there has to be a standard that you live by. It can't just be we're running in chaos or we're going in no particular direction. It has to be a vision, no different than a nonprofit organization or any organization that needs a vision and a mission. And that's how your marriage or your relationship has to be set up. Otherwise, you will go in different directions, whether it's intentional or unintentional. And
Yes.
so, again, I call that just living by a standard. You determine that at some point in premarital counseling or in the early stages of marriage and say, this is kind of basically where we're going. We won't be too rigid. We'll figure it out as we go, but here's the basic direction. Here's the basic standard by which we live and how we will raise our family.
Very, very good. So, how can couples reach out to you? Do you have a website? Do you have a phone number? Something that you can share with our listeners just in case they need to call you, or maybe they're interested in having counseling or learning about more about the dynamic marriage classes.
Well, and I'll let Kelsia speak on the DM classes. As far as reaching out, um, I did not set up a website because I was working all over the place last year. I think I worked everywhere. But for Vine Life Counseling, you can reach out at two numbers. That is 314-420-4733 or 4633. That's 314-420-4733 or 4633. And also on Facebook, Vine Life Counseling, you can kind of follow us there, and we have sometimes daily posts, but at least weekly posts and little tips and tidbits and stuff like that. And that is it. I'll let Kelsia say about DM.
And the dynamic marriage class will be starting registration February 3rd. And we have a Facebook page, Dynamic Marriage, Kelsia and Alphonso. So we post updates on that Facebook page as well.
All right.
And the phone number is still the same, 314-420-4633.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Alfonso and Kelsia Ivy. Alfonso called you a team. I love it. Thank you so much. everyone.
All right. Thank you.
All right. So, everybody, I hope you have enjoyed this episode of the Lovers Lounge, where we talk to experts and other guests on topics related to love, relationships, and sex. I am your host, Tina Love. Thank you for listening. And until next time, peace. And of course, love. Bye-bye.